When it comes to growth, most brands focus on what they'll do. The channels, the campaigns, the tactics. But the brands that grow the fastest and most sustainably start with the who. Because when you understand who you're growing with, the what and even the how falls into place so much easier. Thinking back to my corporate days, every year when it came time for business planning, we'd set our strategic imperatives. And they usually looked something like this. Flawlessly launch new product X. Improve sales force effectiveness. Overtake competitor Z as the market leader. Fast forward to today and I see the same pattern repeating, just with different buzzwords. Instead of product launch, it's build a presence on TikTok. Instead of beat competitor Z, it's rank #1 on Google. And while those are all worthwhile goals, they focus on what you're going to do to grow rather than who you're going to grow with. Whether it's a DTC brand chasing virality or a B2B company doubling down on SEO. Most growth plans start with tactics rather than people. But the fastest growing brands, they do the opposite. They start with who and then build everything else around them. Because when it comes to growth, who will always become before what. Who are the customers you already serve? Who are the people you should be serving but aren't reaching yet? Who are the consumers who show up once but don't stay? And who are the ones your competitors are ignoring? Start with who and then everything else becomes a whole lot clearer. That's what top brands are doing to grow faster and more sustainably. They're focusing on growth communities. The underrepresented and underserved communities most brands overlook. Because the people most brands ignore, those are the ones that are driving the next wave of growth. So let's talk about brands who are leading with who are winning and how you can too. Back in 2019, the New York Times published an article titled "Craft Beer Looks Beyond Young White Dudes with Beards." The subheadline read, "Faced with slowing sales growth, some brewers are looking to reach a new, more diverse audience." Now, the craft beer market was growing, but not like before. Competition was fierce and seltzers and spirits were cutting into their market share. Now, the Brewers Association realized the problem wasn't the product, it was the people. For years, the craft beer market had focused entirely on one profile of drinker, young white men. But the opportunity for growth was sitting in plain sight, with women, with Black and Hispanic consumers, with indigenous and Asian communities that had largely been ignored. Their insight was simple but powerful. They weren't running out of beer drinkers, they were running out of the same kind of beer drinkers. And that's often where growth stalls, where brands max out their original who. Now, another great example of this shift comes from Stanley. There was a trend on TikTok a while back, you've probably seen the meme, the one where guys are joking about trying to beat the girl on the Stairmaster with the pink Stanley cup. Now, that whole trend is proof of just how far the Stanley brand has evolved. For more than a century, Stanley built its reputation on rugged, outdoorsy men, construction workers, campers, guys on job sites. But the people who turned Stanley into a cultural phenomenon, they look nothing like that original audience. Today's Stanley customers look mostly like moms on school pickup and drop-off runs, a college student with a matching set of pastel tumblers, or someone crushing a stair workout with that same pink cup. Now, here's what's fascinating about this whole saga. Stanley's explosive growth didn't come from a new product launch or a clever ad campaign. It came from expanding who the brand believed their brand was for. Two women bloggers who saw the potential convinced Stanley to sell directly to their community of women. Stanley leadership was hesitant at first. They didn't see women as a viable market. But when those bloggers sold thousands of cups in days, the whole market for Stanley changed. Once Stanley broadened its definition of who, sales skyrocketed from about 70 million to more than 750 million in just 4 years. That's what happens whenever you start building your business around the right who. Now let's look at another brand, one who started with who right from day one. And I'm talking about the sports bra in Portland, Oregon. Jenny Nguyen noticed a problem. Every sports bar she walked into was showing men's sports on every TV, and women's sports, if shown at all, were longer an afterthought. So she decided to flip the script. She launched the Sports Bra, a sports bar dedicated entirely to women's sports. Now the concept was super simple, but it was bold. A space built for fans who'd been ignored by the rest of the industry. And the result? Within 8 months, the Sports Bra earned more than $1 million in revenue. Investors took note, and now the brand is expanding into new markets and franchising. Jenny didn't have to reinvent the idea of a sports bar. She just redefined who it was for. And that made all the difference. So what's the lesson here? Too many brands keep chasing new what's, new channels, new tactics, new campaigns, when the real opportunity is to expand their who. Smart brands are winning with growth communities that have been underrepresented and underserved for far too long. And they're doing it in ways that make those consumers feel seen, supported, and like they belong. That's the power of starting with who. It's not a moral choice, it's a growth strategy. So what are the communities that make up the who brands are turning to for growth? These are the communities that have been underrepresented and underserved for far too long. People who don't always fit neatly into what's long been considered to be mainstream. Now, increasingly, many of these audiences are being recognized as growth communities, the groups driving both commercial and cultural momentum. Edgar Hernandez, Chief Strategy Officer at MyCode, the largest multicultural media agency in the US, defines growth communities as Black, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific Islander, LGBTQ+, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha. Now, I like to take it a step further because the growth opportunity doesn't just stop there. When you widen the lens to include communities that have also been historically underrepresented and underserved, like women, people with disabilities, neurodivergent consumers, people with larger body types, those over 50, or those with specific dietary needs, you start to see how big the opportunity really is. Now, growth communities aren't limited by borders either. Around the world, consumers want to engage with and buy from brands that speak their language, both literally and culturally. And while some groups, like indigenous communities, may not represent a large percentage of the population or rapid population growth, their inclusion holds powerful cultural weight. Consumers notice when brands feature, honor, and prop up communities that have long been excluded or erased. It signals alignment with deeper values, fairness, respect, and belonging. And that alignment matters to everyone, not just those within the communities that brands are starting to engage. In fact, 82% of consumers are making more and more brand decisions based upon whether or not a brand's values align with their own. Now, these communities aren't niche. They're influential because they shape how others see what it means to belong. I call that the spillover effect. Take my friend who runs a marketing agency in Europe. She follows a vegan diet, so whenever she was planning a retreat for her team in Europe, she only considered hotels that had a strong vegan menu. Now, her whole team, they weren't vegan, but she was. And the hotel that got the booking was the one that catered to her needs. Or take me, I follow a gluten-free diet for health reasons, and anytime I go out to eat with a larger group, guess who gets to pick which restaurant we go to? I often do, because the people want to know that the restaurant that we're going to go to fits me and my needs, and I just don't end up having to eat salad or chicken and broccoli. If the restaurant doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for the group. Now, these communities, whether or not we're calling them underrepresented and underserved communities, or whether or not we're calling them growth communities, they all have something in common. They have significant buying power. They represent a growing share of the population, or they carry powerful cultural and moral influence that shapes the choices others make. To be clear, this does not mean that you need to serve every one of these communities. What it does mean is that you should be very intentional about which communities you will serve and how you will go about serving them. The key is to expand your who beyond the traditional general market, because today's consumers expect you to. They expect you to speak to them directly, not as part of everyone, but as someone. All right, so now that we've talked a lot about the who, let's get into why their who should lead to the what your brand does to reach your goals, especially whenever it comes to your growth marketing strategy. Now, I've heard a lot of parents, particularly of parents who have more than one child, say that parenting is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every kid kid is unique. Different temperaments, different personalities and needs means you have to figure out what works best to ensure that each child is able to succeed and thrive. The same goes for your customers and the different communities that you are trying to reach. Now, one of my favorite quotes from the 2025 Representation and Marketing Research Study that I published a little while ago came from someone who said, "They're using millennial humor to promote stuff to Gen Z." He was not happy because he felt that using millennial humor to promote stuff to him, someone who was Gen Z, was just out of touch. It was also ineffective and to him just plain nonsensical. But that's exactly what a lot of brands do. They take a one-size-fits-all approach to growth marketing and expect it to work across every audience. We see it all the time. We see brands trying to attract a different who, but with the same general market targets and budgets. We see brands taking existing content and translating it into other languages to try to reach consumers who prefer to engage in their primary language. We see brands using the same influencers, focusing on the same feature sets, sponsoring the same types of events, and they are falling flat. And the truth, the results for these brands aren't as effective because their approach isn't specific enough for the communities that they want to serve. To win with growth communities, you have to design your approach around them, their needs, wants, desires, and behaviors. Now, that doesn't mean throwing out your marketing playbook. It just means letting your audience guide how you use it. For example, HubSpot, who has customers in more than 130 markets around the world, creates funnels specifically designed for the different languages and markets of the consumers they are trying to reach. Walmart, the world's largest retailer, carved out specific time of day to serve the needs of people and caregivers of people with sensory processing disorder. They did that based upon conversations with customers and team members who have sensory processing disorder. Toyota wanted to reach Hispanic consumers, so rather than put ads on traditional media channels, they created an original bilingual podcast, Chasing Sueños, with Sonoro, the fastest growing media company in the world, and one that has expertise in engaging Hispanic consumers. Those brands and those examples prove that the who drives the what. When you take this approach, your resources go farther and your results get stronger. And you grow not just your business, but your impact. When it comes to growth, most brands focus on what they'll do. The channels, the campaigns, the tactics. But the brands that grow the fastest and most sustainably start with the who. Because when you understand who you're growing with, the what and even the how falls into place so much easier. And if you found this video helpful, be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel so you can be the first to know when the next video in the growth marketing series is available. In the next video in this series, I'll cover why tried and true strategies for growth marketing aren't as effective as they have been for years and years and years and years. Until next time, remember, everyone deserves to have a place where they belong. Let's use our individual and collective power to ensure more people feel like they do. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you soon.